Good evening. Welcome to Loveworld USA News. I'm Barbara Sam. First, a quick look at the top stories this evening. President Trump orders release of 10,000 pages of RFK assassination, revealing chilling new details. Secretary Rubio warns U.S. will move on if Russia-Ukraine peace deal fails to materialize soon. President Trump hints at easing China tariffs, says TikTok deal will wait until tensions cool. Trump administration sanctions Yemen's international bank for financing Houthi terrorists. Federal judge blocks CFPB layoffs amid Trump administration overhaul. And now to the news. The Trump administration has released nearly 10,000 pages of documents related to the 1968 assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, including disturbing handwritten notes from gunman Sirhan that declared RFK must be disposed of like his brother was. The release, part of Trump's broader effort to declassify historic records tied to major political assassinations, includes previously unseen FBI interviews, photographs, and handwritten that had been sitting in government archives for decades. Kennedy, a Democratic presidential candidate, was shot moments after his California primary victory speech at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Sirhan, who was convicted and remained in prison, expressed radical political views in his writings, including pledging support for communist regimes and vague plans to overthrow the current president, then Lyndon Johnson. In one document, Sirhan anonymously hinted at upcoming actions, stating, in quotes, "I have no absolute plans yet, but soon will compose them," end quote. Among the newly released materials are witness accounts describing pre-assassination rumors in cities like Milwaukee and overseas in Israel. Some tourists recalling hearing weeks before RFK's death that a shooting had occurred or was being planned. The archive also includes official records from the FBI and CIA and was posted publicly by the National Archives as part of an executive order Trump signed in January to declassify documents tied to the assassination of RFK and Martin Luther King Jr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., now U.S. Health Secretary, applauded the release, calling it a necessary step towards restoring trust in American government. The Trump administration has previously released JFK assassination files and emphasized public transparency in matters historically shielded by intelligence agencies. While many conspiracy theorists still swirl around both Kennedy assassinations, the latest release marks a major moment in public access to America's most haunting political tragedies. Watch this.
Today's a big day. It is the first time we are releasing. The country will be able to see the documents that have been sitting here at the National Archives and Records Agency around the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Thanks to President Trump's leadership and his executive order mandating maximum transparency, we have had well over 100 people, some of whom you can see here, who have been working around the clock, going page by page, all to lead us to this day where the 10,000 pages that have been sitting here are now going to be available online at archives.gov/RFK.
So important, and this transparency is something that many Americans have been interested in, and so many Americans have been invested in the release of these files.
So today's release is 10,000 pages. Those are the ones that we had access to here. Just the other day, we discovered and found another 50,000 pages specifically related to the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. And so the work you're seeing happening here today is going to continue on as we have other teams going out and doing those searches and hunting for additional records that, once again, have not been found or released to the public ever before.
Well, we would love to look at some of these documents with you if you have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
This here is a file of the Department of Justice case file on Sirhan Sirhan, and it includes photographs and map of the Ambassador Hotel as they were conducting the investigation into the assassination. Over here we have records from the FBI Boston field office. The FBI gave the investigation the code name of Kensalt, and so part of this release includes some of those Kensalt investigative records, and I know that there are many more to come.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this has really shined a light on the need for more of these types of releases to occur. People will find in the release today, there's no quote-unquote smoking gun, but there's a lot of interesting things that have not been previously known that really call into question what really happened and
Wow.
who was behind it. If you look on this memo alone, you see Kuwait, London, Tel Aviv, Beirut, Jeddah, Tunis.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio has signaled growing impatience with the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, warning that the United States may step away from its role in peace negotiations if no progress is made within days. Speaking during a diplomatic visit to Paris, Rubio said the administration will assess whether a peace deal is still feasible in the short term, and added, in quote, "If it's not going to happen, then we're just going to move on," end quote. Rubio noted that President Trump is likely nearing a point of frustration, suggesting he's probably at a point where he's going to say, "Well, we're done," end quote. Still, he maintained that the U.S. is ready to support negotiations if either side demonstrates a genuine commitment to peace. In a post on X, Rubio reiterated the time is now to end the war. The time to end the war is now, emphasizing ongoing talks with European allies, including France, the UK, Germany, and Ukraine. Despite diplomatic efforts, the war continues with intensity. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported renewed Russian missile attacks on cities and civilians. Meanwhile, voices in Congress remain divided. While some have urged maximum military support for Ukraine, others in Trump's circle, including Vice President J.D. Vance, have grown critical of Zelensky's appeals to the West. As frustrations mount and negotiations remain stalled, the U.S. administration appears to be recalibrating its role in the conflict, with Rubio's comments marking a potential shift in America's posture on one of the world's most urgent geopolitical crises. Let's take a look.
I think it's important to remind everybody that the Ukraine war is a terrible thing, but it's not our war. We didn't start it. The United States has been helping Ukraine over the last 3 years, and we want it to end. But it's not our war. I want everyone to understand that. And the reason why I make that point is the president has spent 87 days at the highest level of his government repeatedly taking efforts to bring this war to an end. We are now reaching a point where we need to decide and determine whether this is even possible or not, which is why we're engaging both sides. This war has no military solution to it. It really doesn't. It's not going to be decided with, neither side has some strategic capability to end this war quickly. And so what we're talking about here is avoiding thousands and thousands of people from dying over the next year. We're trying to avoid that. But we're not going to continue to fly all over the world and do meeting after meeting after meeting if no progress is being made. So if they're serious about peace, either side or both, we want to help. If it's not going to happen, then we're just going to move on. We're going to move on to other topics that are equally, if not more important in some ways, to the United States.
President Donald Trump has suggested that the long-running tariff dispute between the U.S. and China might be nearing a resolution, suggesting he could lower some trade penalties if it means speeding up negotiations. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump said Chinese officials had reached out in recent days to discuss restarting talks and express optimism about maintaining his relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. President Trump noted that while he has imposed steep tariffs on Chinese goods, some reaching as high as 145%, further increase might hurt consumer demand and complicate the path to a trade deal. At a certain point, you make it where people don't buy, he said. I may want to go less because, we want people to buy. He emphasized that any steps forward will require mutual cooperation and said a resolution is possible if this thing works out. The president also addressed the ongoing TikTok situation where the Chinese-owned social media platform remains in limbo. While a deal has reportedly reached for the sale of TikTok's U.S. assets to American firms, Trump said that the agreement will be delayed until broader trade issues with China are resolved. The president reiterated that the potential TikTok agreement will benefit both countries and hinted that China may favor the terms currently on the table. However, he made clear that no final moves could be made until progress is seen on the larger economic front. Let's take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday signaled a potential end to the tit-for-tat tariff hikes between the U.S. and China, saying, quote, I don't want them to go higher because at a certain point you make it where people don't buy. So I may not want to go higher, or I may not want to even go up to that level. I may want to go less because you want people to buy, and at a certain point, people aren't going to buy. Trump's comments point to a dwindling appetite for big blanket tariffs on dozens of countries after markets reacted violently when they were introduced on April 2nd. The Republican president slapped 10% tariffs on most goods entering the country, but delayed higher levies while negotiations take place. Still, he hiked rates on Chinese imports after Beijing retaliated with its own countermeasures. Trump on Thursday declined to give details about talks between the two countries or whether they included Chinese President Xi Jinping. Talks between the United States and dozens of countries are expected over coming days and weeks, while most of the tariffs are paused for 90 days. Also on Thursday, Trump met with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, the only European Union leader invited to his inauguration in January. Meloni's trip to the Oval Office comes amid a tariff dispute between Washington and the 27-nation bloc, and was seen as an attempt to facilitate dialogue and leverage the good relationship between the two leaders. After the meeting, Meloni said Trump had agreed to an official visit to Rome and would consider meeting representatives of the European Union while there. However, she made clear she could not lock in deals on behalf of the EU, which has responsibility on trade. She said Italy will have to increase its imports of liquefied natural gas, and said Italian firms would invest billions of dollars in the U.S. in the coming years.
The news will be back after this break.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. We are finally putting America first. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. More production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart. This will be indeed the golden age.
Welcome back. The Trump administration has imposed sanctions on the International Bank of Yemen, known as IBY, and 3 of its senior executives for allegedly providing financial support to the Iran-backed Houthi movement. which the U.S. designates as a foreign terrorist organization. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, known as OFAC, said IBY plays a key role in helping the Houthis access the global banking system, including the SWIFT networks to facilitate international transactions that fund attacks in the Red Sea region. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Faulkner said the move is part of broader efforts to support Yemen's international recognized government to disrupt the Houthis' ability to secure funds and procure key components for their destabilizing attacks. The sanctions block all U.S.-based assets of the bank's executives. Chairman Kamal Hassan al-Jabri, General Manager Ahmed Tabet Noman al-Abbas, and Deputy General Manager Al-Budakar Ali Bazara, and prohibit U.S. persons from conducting transactions with them or any majority-owned entities. At a State Department briefing, spokesperson Tammy Bruce warned foreign entities against aiding the Houthi, singling out the Chinese satellite firm CGSTL for allegedly providing surveillance assistance used in attacks. Bruce criticized Beijing's continued support of CGSTL despite U.S. concerns, calling it a clear contradiction to China's public calls for peace. She emphasized that restoring freedom of navigation in the Red Sea is our priority to Trump. The Treasury said IBY facilitated Houthi-linked oil purchases and helped the group bypass sanctions, promoting the administration to act as part of a wider strategy to dismantle Iran's regional threat networks. The sanctions come amid increasing Houthi assaults on commercial shipping, which the U.S. says threatens both regional and global commerce. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the mass termination of nearly 1,500 employees at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, known as the CFPB, halting what have been amounted to 90% reduction in the agency's workforce. The dismantles were part of a broader reorganization effort under President Donald Trump administration, which has been critical of the agency's role and operations. The Trump administration, supported by Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, Director Elon Musk, has long advocated for downsizing or even abolishing the CFPB, arguing the agency has become overly politicized and inefficient. Despite those calls, government attorneys have stated in court that the agency will remain operational, although with a new structure and narrowed mission. A memo circulated before the firings details significant changes at the Bureau, including a 50% reduction in supervisory exams and a shift in focus back to banks and other depository institutions, reversing a decade-long trend towards overseeing non-bank official entities, or non-bank financial entities, rather. The memo said CFPB would prioritize consumer complaint resolutions, remediation, and voluntary correction rather than aggressive enforcement. U.S. District Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who issued the temporary injunction, voiced serious concerns that the administration's actions may violate standing court orders. During an emergency hearing, she questioned the legality of the abrupt firings and ordered that dismissed employees retain access to their computer systems while the matter is reviewed. Watch this.
Russell Vought ordering the CFPB to issue no new rules and to stop new investigations, the move drawing backlash from Democratic lawmakers. Senator Elizabeth Warren posting on X, quote, "The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has returned over $21 billion to families cheated by Wall Street. Republicans have failed to gut it in Congress, and in the courts, they will fail again."
Japan has reported a significant $63 billion trade surplus with the United States for the fiscal year ending in March, even as it recorded an overall trade deficit of $37 billion globally, marking the country's fourth consecutive annual shortfall. The figures released by Japan's finance minister on Thursday come at a sensitive time as Japanese officials engage in talks in Washington to push back against steep U.S. tariffs proposed by President Donald Trump. The trade imbalance has become a flashpoint between the two allies, with President Trump announcing earlier this month a 24% tariff on Japanese imports, later partially paused for 90 days amid global market jitters. Japan, a major investor in the U.S. economy and key regional partner, is now facing a 10% baseline tariff and additional 25% duties on cars, auto parts, steel, and aluminum. Japanese negotiators are seeking to mitigate these levies, which pose a growing challenge for Prime Minister Shigeru Isabe's administration. Despite the tensions, Japan's exports rose 5.9% over the past year, driven by strong demand for semiconductors and automobiles. Imports grew by 4.7%, though a weakened yen pushed import costs higher. A sharp rise in foreign tourism also boosted export figures, as spending by overseas visitors is categorized as export income in economic statistics. In March alone, Japan recorded a $4 billion trade surplus, with exports to the U.S. rising by 3%. While trade with China declined, exports to nearby Asian markets like Taiwan, South Korea, and Hong Kong surged, possibly reflecting efforts to reroute shipments to avoid U.S. tariff risks. Some analysts speculate that Japan may offer trade concessions, such as importing more American rice, to diffuse tensions, especially as rising rice prices and domestic shortages could make such a move politically palatable. The outcome of the talks in Washington could have lasting implications for the global trade landscape and U.S.-Japan economic ties. Let's take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump touted big progress in tariff talks with Japan on Wednesday, after one of the first face-to-face negotiations since he imposed sweeping global duties earlier this month, most of which he later paused for 90 days. Japan had not expected the president to get involved in Wednesday's talks, which it had been hoping to limit to trade and investment matters. But when Trump announced his involvement early in the day, he said the discussion agenda included the amount Japan pays towards hosting U.S. troops. Afterwards, Trump said on social media that meeting the Japanese delegation had been a, quote, great honor, and that big progress had been made without giving details. Opposite Trump in the meeting was Ryosei Akazawa, a close confidant of Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. He spoke to reporters after the talks.
Meetings with Japan are a priority. When Trump says that there are 70 or 100 countries in line, there's no way the president can attend all of them, so the talks with Japan are a priority. I think his presence is a clear sign of that.
Ishiba sounded a more cautious tone speaking to reporters later in Tokyo, saying that negotiations going forward, quote, will not be easy. Trump earlier this month blasted Japan for what he said was a 700% tariff on rice, a figure Tokyo disputes. Levies on autos are particularly painful for Japan, as cars make up nearly a third of the country's shipments to the U.S., its biggest export market. Trump's involvement is a potential sign he wants to keep tight control over negotiations with dozens of countries expected over coming days and weeks. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni heads to the White House on Thursday to discuss tariffs imposed on the European Union with Trump. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has invited South Korea's finance minister to Washington for talks next week.
The news continues after this break. Stay with us.
The countdown to the Lord's soon return has begun, and in this first quarter of the year of completeness, Loveworld USA has indeed been spreading and preaching the gospel of our Lord Jesus, preparing the hearts of billions around the world to expect the Lord.
This year, we will complete the full preaching of the gospel in all nations.
Loveworld USA broadcasted life-changing programs with our man of God. Global Communion Service, Your Loveworld Specials, Global Day of Prayer, Healing Streams. Loveworld News, where we emphasize truth and deception. Truth Watch USA, where Americans are exposed to the truth. Topics such as the failed agenda of so-called globalists, what's really happening to your food, President Trump, a sign to the church. Prayer programs where effective prayers were offered. Tremendous power. Pray for America. Faith-filled programs like I'm Just Saying, Pastor Chris Worth reading, Stick to the Word, programs with Pastor Benny, and many more. We say thank you, dearest partners, for contributing towards our programming and daily operations through your partnership. Loveworld USA is positioned for a massive harvest of souls all around the world as we set our sail to reach more people in this second quarter, in more languages, and change more lives. This is a call to our dearest partners all over the world to join this mandate in completing the full preaching of the gospel to all nations as you sponsor our 2025 projects. 1. Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. Ensure the spread of the message of the man of God through Loveworld USA. The spread of our ministry programs and agenda through satellite, cable, internet, digital, mobile apps, Alpha TV, OTT platforms, our news, and our current affairs. 2. Minutes to Reach Billions 4.0. Make your every minute count for the gospel as we spread the awareness of Loveworld USA to your world. 3. Translation of our language-specific channels. Make it possible for billions around the world to watch our programs in their native language. 4. Tag your name to a program. Sponsor and tag your name to our various Loveworld USA programs. You can adopt a specific program. 5. Studio upgrade. Join us today with your lavish gift to the work of Loveworld USA. Every SPs or dollar you give goes to accomplishing our mandate to fully preach the gospel with our life-transforming content. For more information, please call the number showing on your screen. God bless you.
Welcome back. In their final televised debate before the April general election, leaders of Canada's 4 major federal parties clashed over a wide range of issues, from housing and health care to tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Liberal leader and current Prime Minister Mark Carney faced persistent attacks from rivals who sought to tie him to his unpopular predecessor, Justin Trudeau. Carney, who's been in office just a month, defended his record and emphasized that he is a very different person from Trudeau. One of the major topics of the debate was how Canada should respond to U.S. tariffs, including a sweeping 25% tariff on Canadian exports to cover the USMCA trade agreement. Carney and other leaders acknowledged Canada's economic disadvantage and suggested a more nuanced approach than the previous dollar-for-dollar retaliation strategy. Carney said Canada will now target tariffs that inflict minimum harm on its own economy while still sending a message to the U.S. Trump, for his part, has recently softened his rhetoric towards Canada, hinting at more constructive negotiations after the election. On domestic policy, the leaders presented starkly different visions. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pushed a low-tax, tough-on-crime platform, while NDP leader Jagmeet Singh advocated for expanded social programs and health care. Carney remained centrist, emphasizing a catalyst role for government in tackling crisis. Bloc Quebec's leader Yves Francis Blanchet Francisco Blanchett, meanwhile, focused heavily on Quebec's interests, inserting regional issues at every opportunity. Smaller parties struggled for visibility as national polls showed a narrowing race between the Liberals and Conservatives, seeing NDP facing the possibility of a significant loss of seats, worked hard to distinguish itself as the progressive alternative, while the Bloc also risked losing ground in Quebec. Still, despite the political stakes, the debate remained civil, even warm at times, offering a sharp contrast to more combative political debates elsewhere, particularly in the United States. Let's take a look.
Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, Yves-François Blanchet taking part in the one and only English debate of the federal election campaign. The two-hour debate focused on a number of issues that have dominated the campaign trail and policy announcements, from defending Canada against tariffs to addressing affordability and building homes, to how each party leader would address crime and health care.
Today, Mr. Carney mentioned slowing operation spending. That's a cut to services. He said his plan. He has a plan to balance the operating budget within 3 years. That's going to require massive cuts to spending. We calculated that at $43 billion in cuts. In fact, Rosemary Barton, when he was on the show on February 16th, he said he would cut spending. He said it would be in operations. He defined it as transfers in health. And finally, longtime Liberal and former House Leader Karina Gould said that Mr. Carney's plans would mean massive cuts. That's the only way to achieve it. So, Mr. Carney, do you think it is leadership to cut health care at a time when it is in crisis? I think it is wrong. We can't do that.
We will not cut transfers for health care. We will not cut health care spending, full stop.
But
we'll
Mr.
have
Carney,
a detail, if I may.
Who do we believe, Mr. Carney today, or the one he spoke on Rosemary Barton's show on February 16th?
I did not.
The one that repeated again that he would cut spending?
If I may.
Who do we believe?
If I may. Consistently said, we'll preserve all transfers to the provinces, including the increases. We will preserve all the transfers to individuals.
A wave of protests against KFC branches across Pakistan has turned deadly, with one employee killed and dozens arrested amid rising anger over the war in Gaza. Demonstrators have accused the American fast food chain of symbolizing U.S. and Israeli support, leading to attacks on KFC outlets in cities including Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad. Social media videos show protesters wielding iron rods, storming stores, and setting two Karachi branches ablaze before police intervened. The victim, 45-year-old Asif Nawaz, was a kitchen staff member at a KFC in Shekhapur near Lahore. He was shot during one of the protests on April 14th, reportedly struck by a bullet fired from over 100 feet away. Authorities said it was unclear whether Nawaz was targeted or hit by accident. Regional Police Officer Arthar Ismail confirmed 40 arrests so far, with the main suspect still at large. The protests are fueled by calls to boycott Western brands perceived to be linked to Israel. Religious leaders like prominent Sunni scholar Mutif Tariq Usumi and the Islamic political party Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, known as TLP, have encouraged peaceful boycotts but condemned violence. Islam is not a religion that encourages harm or harming others, Usumi emphasized, urging restraint while maintaining pressure through nonviolent means. Attacks on global brands are not new in the region, especially since the outbreak of Israel's war in Gaza. Companies like McDonald's and Starbucks have faced backlash, boycotts, and public condemnation. KFC and its parent company, Yum Brands, have not yet commented on the recent unrest or the death of their employee. And just before we end the news, a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. President Trump orders release of 10,000 pages on RFK assassination, revealing chilling new details. Secretary Rubio warns U.S. will move on if Russia-Ukraine peace deal fails to materialize soon. President Trump hints at easing China tariffs, says TikTok deal will wait until tensions cool. Trump administration sanctions Yemen's international bank for financing Houthi terrorists. Federal judge blocks CFPB layoffs amid Trump administration overhaul. And that's the news for today. Join us at the same time tomorrow for more news. I'm Barbara Sam. Good night and God bless you.